Well, I'm a psychologist. It's quite a drive to get there, let me tell you. I wasted a lot of gas first going to the wrong place, but it cost a lot of gas just making it to that psychologist appointment. It's fucking way out in Clinton, Louisiana, because that's the nearest sliding scale clinic to me. But back home now. Still feeling depressed. I got some new medication, Effexor, that I haven't been on for over 10 years, but that's the last antidepressant I remember taking. So they put me on it again. So hopefully it'll make me feel better. I'm going to go pick it up tomorrow morning. I just got the notification that it was ready at Walmart right after I got home. Anyways, I guess for now I'm going to have some cookies and milk and go to fucking sleep. Let's see if the milk I got is still good. Oh, it's got 10 whole fucking days on it. It won't open. Maybe that's a good sign. There we go. Seems like this fucking milk from Walmart is always almost bad.
Every additive, booster, detergent, and seal conditioner gets tested right here to prove it's good to go in your engine.
All right, big morning, top of the hour. I'm Poppy Harlow.
And I'm Jim Sciutto. For the second time this month, the House Judiciary Committee is staring down at an empty chair as the White House defies yet another House subpoena, and as more House Democrats begin to think enough is enough. Former White House counsel Don McGahn, he's supposed to be testifying in public, under oath, any minute now, chiefly about the accounts that he already gave to the special counsel of apparent obstruction of justice attempts by President Trump.
Instead, McGahn almost surely will be cited for contempt, though maybe not today. And Democrats who have sided with the House Speaker Nancy Pelosi against beginning impeachment proceedings may begin to rethink their reluctance. Let's go to Manu Raju. He joins us on the Hill, and we all remember the fireworks 3 weeks ago. The Attorney General did the same thing, the same committee. So, more fireworks on tap today?
No question about it. Expect Democrats to express their outrage at what they believe is what they're calling a lawless administration, just subpoenas, and the White House instructing Don McGahn not to show up because they say he's not to be compelled to testify because he's a senior level White House aide, and expect Democrats to lay out their next steps, namely to hold Don McGahn in contempt, along with Bill Barr and others, and those could happen in a matter of days. The fireworks are about to begin, and this is just the beginning of the process as Democrats grapple with what to do now with the administration saying no to all of their demands.
Now, this is happening, Manu, as you have more Democrats pushing, in defiance of their leadership, to begin an impeachment inquiry. Does McGahn's non-appearance today, in effect, give more ammunition to that?
Essentially, yes. A number of Democrats I have spoken to, from top members to rank and file members, all say it's time to start an impeachment inquiry. Do you believe that an impeachment inquiry is warranted now, given the stonewalling from this administration?
I think that the administration is certainly pushing the Congress in that direction.
I think it's time.
Yeah, I think it is. I was hoping that you would hear from McGahn and Mueller, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen.
So those members have some influence with the Democratic leadership, and also some ones who are very outspoken, including freshman members like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who I just caught up with as well, and also said that this caucus should not be hesitant in moving forward with impeachment.
I trust the Speaker is taking a measured approach to ensure that we're moving everyone forward. I know that being a Speaker is hard. Holding this party together is a difficult task, but I think that they will do it. I personally think that I think
Thank you, appreciate it. So you're seeing the pressure that is building on Nancy Pelosi, the House Speaker, who has urged a more methodical approach, a go slow approach. And I'm told in multiple meetings that occurred last night, this debate played out behind the scenes. Pelosi saying, look, we need to be deliberative. We have a process here. We're issuing subpoenas. They're saying, no, we're going to court. And in one case, according to one yesterday, they are winning.
A viewer.
Results.
Welcome, viewer.
Hasty in moving forward with impeachment, but they also don't want to rule it out. And at the moment, Democratic leaders are on the same.
I just got home.
During that, the House Judiciary Chairman, who would oversee any impeachment proceeding, discuss this with her in a closed-door meeting. And
yeah, that's what I call this place.
Is on the same page with the Speaker. The question is, will she ultimately?
All my wife's shit's still sitting on her table.
It's time to move forward, guys.
That is the question.
I don't know what
as
the
we
fuck
see
to
the
do with
chairman
it.
of the House Judiciary Committee during now, they're just getting seated next to the ranking member Republican Doug Collins. We're going to listen to their opening statements, but Manu, as we wait for that, can I just ask you, is the Democratic strategy here by leadership, at least Pelosi, etc., to let the clock run out on this, ask for more and more, not get any of it from
one
the White
more
House,
actual
and then
cigarette,
push forward with impeachment
and a
akin
pack of
to Nixon
Cheyennes.
and Article 3 of the impeachment proceedings against Nixon, and just say, look, they're not turning over papers here, they're not turning over documents. Hold on, let's listen in. Here's right
Well,
now.
I think there's a
We welcome everyone to today's hearing on oversight of the report by Special Counsel Robert Mueller III, former White House counsel Donald McGahn II. I will now recognize myself for an opening statement. More than a year ago, White House counsel Don McGahn sat for the first of several interviews with Special Counsel Robert Mueller. Over the course of those interviews, he described how the president directed him to have the special counsel fired. He described how the president ordered him to lie about it. He described several other obstructive incidents outlined in the special counsel's report. The president, in contrast,
Welcome, viewer number 2.
refused to be interviewed by the special counsel, or even to answer written questions about his attempts to obstruct.
Please do say hello in the chats. I'd like to hear from whoever's watching.
To address the allegations spelled out by Mr.
The whole
McGahn
reason I do
and
these
outlined
streams
in the
is just to
report,
have fucking people to talk to.
President Trump relied on his preferred mode of communication. He took to Twitter.
Because I am a New Orleans man,
a liar.
which
His lawyers
means
went on cable television
I like to be
to
social.
do the same. Call Mr.
And I'm
McGahn
stranded
a
out
liar.
in the middle of
There are
fucking
reports of
nowhere in the
president
country,
and lieutenants exerting other
which
kinds of
means
pressure
I don't
on
get to
Mr.
be
McGahn.
social.
In short, the president took it upon himself to intimidate a witness who has a legal obligation to be here today. This conduct is not remotely acceptable. The White House asserts that Mr. McGahn does not have to appear today because he is entitled to, quote, absolute immunity, unquote, from our subpoenas. We know this argument is wrong, of course, because the executive branch has tried this approach before. In 2007, President George Bush attempted to invoke a similarly broad and unjustified assertion of executive privilege, and asked his former counsel, Harriet Myers, to ignore a subpoena issued by this committee. Ms. Myers also did not appear at her scheduled hearing. Judge John Bates, who was appointed by President Bush, slapped down that argument fairly quickly. Quote, "The executive cannot identify a single judicial opinion that recognizes absolute immunity for senior presidential advisors in this or any other context. That simple yet critical fact bears repeating. The asserted absolute immunity claim here is entirely unsupported by the case law." Close quote from the judicial decision. In other words, when this committee issues a subpoena, even to a senior presidential advisor, the witness must show up. Our subpoenas are not optional. Mr. McGahn has a legal obligation to be here for this scheduled appearance. If he does not immediately correct his mistake, this committee will have no choice but to enforce the subpoena against him. Mr. McGahn did not appear today because the president prevented it. Just as the president has said that he would, quote, fight all subpoenas, close quote, issued by Congress as part of his broader efforts to cover up his misconduct. This stonewalling makes it all the more important to highlight some of the incidents that Mr. McGahn is said to have witnessed. Let me recount some of them. We know that the president directed Mr. McGahn to prevent then Attorney General Sessions from accusing himself from overseeing the investigation into Russian election interference.
Did I say hello yet?
On March 3rd,
Viewer number 3, viewer number 4.
shortly after
Please
Attorney
do say
General
hello in the
Sessions
chats.
did recuse himself from the Russian investigation, the president summoned Mr. McGahn to the Oval Office. According to the Mueller report,
second.
quote, the president opened the conversation by saying, "I don't have a lawyer," unquote. The president told Mr. McGahn that he wished that Roy Cohn was his attorney instead. Roy Cohn, of course, is known principally as the chief architect of the Army McCarthy hearings that destroyed so many lives back in 1954. An actual political witch hunt, not the imaginary kind the president decries.
Hey, what's up?
Mr. Cohn served as President Trump's lawyer for a long time.
Let me know if you do feel like chatting. Let me know if any ads showed up on the video.
Mr. Cohen was ultimately disbarred for unethical practices in 1986. Mr. McGahn refused to follow blindly into unethical behavior. Mr. McGahn told the president that the Department of Justice ethics officials had weighed in, that Mr. Sessions would not unrecuse himself, and he advised the president not to have any contact
So it's about
with Mr. Sessions.
5 p.m.
Days later, the president did exactly the opposite. He summoned Mr.
Here in
McGahn
Louisiana.
and Mr. Sessions to Mar-a-Lago, where the president again, quote, expressed his anger, unquote. He said he wanted Mr. Sessions to act as his fixer. He said he wanted Mr. Sessions to undo his recusal and to limit the scope of the investigation. But Mr. Sessions, too, refused the president's orders. On June 17th, 2017,
My fucking air conditioning isn't working very well.
He called Mr. McGahn
I'm hanging out with my shirt off.
and
Apologize.
directed him to order Rod Rosenstein to fire Robert Mueller.
Fucking AC wasn't even cooling down last night.
Call me back when you do it. Once again, Mr. McGahn refused. This time, Mr. McGahn felt the president's behavior was so inappropriate that he said he would rather resign than trigger a constitutional crisis. In early 2018, after press reports described the president's attempt to force Mr. McGahn to remove the special counsel on his behalf, the president repeated his pattern. He summoned Mr. McGahn to his office and he got angry. Quote, "This story doesn't look good. You need to correct this. You're the White House counsel." Close quote. President Trump told Mr. McGahn. "What about these notes? Why do you take notes?" the president said to Mr. McGahn, inquiring why Mr. McGahn had documented their conversation. The president then told Mr. McGahn to tell the American people something that was not true. He asked him to deny those reports publicly. Mr. McGahn again refused the president's order. He refused the president's order to lie to to the American people on the president's behalf. 6 months later, the president announced that Mr. McGahn would be leaving the White House. The special counsel found Mr. McGahn to be, quote, a credible witness with no motive to lie or exaggerate given the position he held in the White House, close quote. That's from the Mueller report.
But
Special
I'm
counsel
still
also found
in
the following,
love with you.
quote, substantial evidence indicates that
I
by June
wanna
17,
see you
2017,
dance
the
again.
president knew his conduct was under investigation by a
'Cause
federal
I'm
prosecutor
still in
who would
love
present
with
any evidence of
you.
federal crimes to a grand jury.
On this
Substantial
harvest
evidence
moon.
indicates that the president's attempts to remove the special counsel were linked to the special counsel's oversight of investigations that involved the president's conduct. And most immediately, the reports that the president was being investigated for potential obstruction of justice. Substantial evidence indicates, and these are all quotes from the report, substantial evidence indicates that in repeatedly urging McGahn to dispute that he was ordered to have the special counsel terminated, the president acted for the purpose of
I'm
influencing
fucking
McGahn's
depressed,
account
man.
in order to deflect or prevent further scrutiny of the president's conduct towards the investigation. Substantial evidence indicates
It's nicer in here than it is out there.
to have Sessions limit the scope of the special counsel's investigation to future
Otherwise, I would have gone and got my medications
was
already.
intended to prevent further investigative scrutiny of the president and his campaign's conduct. Incidents documented in detail in the Mueller report constitutes a crime. But for the Department of Justice's policy of refusing to indict any sitting president, I believe the president would have been indicted and charged with these crimes. I'm not alone in this belief. Over 900 former federal prosecutors from across the political spectrum, whose job was to determine when the elements of a crime have been satisfied, have agreed that the president committed crimes that would have been charged if he were not the sitting president. And I believe that the president's conduct since the report was released, with respect to Mr. McGahn's testimony and other information we have sought, has carried this pattern of obstruction and cover-up well beyond the four corners of the Mueller report. The president has declared out
So I wonder,
his intention to cover up this misconduct.
are there any actual
He told
women who
Mr.
watch
McGahn
sleep
to commit
streams?
crimes on his behalf.
Or just a bunch of guys pretending to be
He
women?
told Mr. McGahn to lie about it. After the report came out, the president claimed that Mr. McGahn lied to the special counsel about what happened. Then he directed Mr. McGahn not to come here today so that the public would not hear his testimony and so that we could not question him. President Trump may think he can hide behind his lawyers as he launches a series of baseless legal arguments designed to obstruct our work. He cannot think these legal arguments will prevail in court, but he can think he can slow us down and run out the clock on the American people. Let me be clear. This committee will hear Mr. McGahn's testimony, even if we have to go to court to secure it. We will not allow the president to prevent the American people from hearing from this witness. We will not allow the president to block congressional subpoenas, putting himself and his allies above the law. We will not allow the president to stop this investigation, and nothing in these unjustified and unjustifiable legal attacks will stop us from pressing.
Oh, shit. Oops. Oh, well, that wasn't entirely interesting anyway.
And during our summer sticker sale event, hurry and get 0% APR for 66 months.
All right.
And up to $2,000 additional cash on specially tagged 2019 models. Visit your local Kia dealer, look for a sticker, and save. Hurry into Kia's summer sticker sales event today.
White House correspondent, and Jeffrey Toobin, former federal prosecutor and CNN chief legal analyst. Jeffrey, I know you watched this show. You heard Rachel Babe from the Washington Post tell us moments ago about these dramatic meetings overnight in the House, where House Judiciary members were pushing Nancy Pelosi, saying now is the time. We need to launch these impeachment proceedings, and these are senior members of the Judiciary Committee, and Jerry Nadler ultimately pushed as well, although apparently he was talked out of it by Nancy Pelosi.
Well, remember, you're talking about the Judiciary Committee, which is always the place with the most ideologically partisan members of each party. So, what Nancy Pelosi is most concerned about are all those Democrats who were elected in the marginal districts in Pennsylvania, in California, and those people are the ones who are worried about seeming too aggressive on impeachment. There's also this legal issue, which I think some of these Democrats are overstating. Democrats are saying, look, we are failing to get access to documents simply in our oversight role. We need to launch an impeachment proceeding because courts will give greater deference to our document and witness subpoenas if it's an actual impeachment proceeding. I'm not sure they're right about that.
But can you explain to me that reasoning? And I know you are on the
Seems to be what the Republicans made up about the shit.
There are other lawyers who look at that and say, yes, impeachment does give them enhanced powers.
Correct. But look at what happened yesterday. Yesterday, the judge in the case where the Oversight Committee subpoenaed the accounting firm for Trump's tax returns. And the judge said, look, you don't need an impeachment inquiry to do oversight if you're in Congress. Congress is entitled to these documents, even though it's not an impeachment proceeding. And I think that's the more likely correct view. And the president is not going to turn over these documents anyway.
But doesn't impeachment allow some cracks in the stonewalling? The White House has been stonewalling in terms of turning over people and documents. Doesn't impeachment give Congress somehow more teeth?
Arguably it does, but it's still going to mean court fights. I mean, even if it's an impeachment inquiry, it'll go to the district court, it'll go to the Court of Appeals. So, it's going to be the congressional inquiry, whatever you name it, is going to be tied up in court for months no matter what.
I guess, David Gregory, I was hearing a different calculus. As of last night, it feels as though there's sort of a different argument being made inside Congress and certainly behind closed doors, as we have from Rachel Bates reporting. Basically that they're not going to try to remove the president from office. That's a non-starter. Everybody accepts that. Everybody knows that won't get through the Senate. But that investigatively, they may want to start impeachment just because they think it gives them more heft.
Right, but that's really not the point of impeachment. Impeachment is a political process, and if it's wielded as a partisan tool, it can backfire, which is what the experience was when President Clinton was impeached. And I think, in the broader picture too, both parties should be worried about one party or the other wielding impeachment as a political tool that becomes bigger and more important than our elections in this country. So if there is a view that you're never going to convict, you're never going to actually get impeachment of the president, then what is it that you're really after? The important point is that Congress has an oversight role, independent of these proceedings, always has an oversight role, and specifically with regard to the Mueller report, it's quite clear on these questions of obstruction of justice that the special counsel wanted Congress to weigh in, to get into this issue, to make a determination. That seems to get lost in the daily machinations here. But I think the politics are what are overwhelming. Where is the momentum building toward beginning an impeachment proceeding? Nancy Pelosi is thinking, as Jeffrey says, about those House districts that are more marginal. She's also thinking about 2020 and seeing how the president can make this a fight about the power of the executive, can make himself a victim, and who can go on and on about the overreach of Democrats who never wanted to see him in the White House in the first place and are just trying to rip him out of office without turning to elections. I keep saying, where are the presidential candidates on this, but not the huge field? Where is Joe Biden on this? He's not talking about impeaching the president right now. And I think as our election season is well underway, even though we're not in 2020. And I think those are the signals to look at.
I think the reason he's not talking about it is the most interesting thing here. It's easy not to for him. He can say this is up to Congress. I'm going to stay out of it. I do want to point out, though, there's a conundrum here, and David pointed out correctly that Robert Mueller said that deciding obstruction is well within the realm of Congress. It's Congress's job to do so, not necessarily mine in the Justice Department. The secondary conundrum, though, which we've just been talking about, is it may be that impeachment is the only way they can get the powers to do it in the way that they feel fit in order to get the documents, in order to get the witnesses. So it might be that they needed to do the job that Mueller says only they have the power to do. And Abby Phillip, added to that conundrum is it may be that this is what the president and his allies want. They may be trying to force Democrats into this ultimately.
That is exactly right. I mean, a couple of days ago, Nancy Pelosi said she believed that President Trump and his allies were trying to goad Democrats into impeachment by stonewalling, trying to make the Democratic Party believe that that is the only means to obtaining, whether it is information or just the simple oversight powers that Congress has. And I think that she is really concerned about that, and she's right to be, because I think this is a White House who believes that if Democrats go to the impeachment step, they will be overstepping their bounds. They'll be going further than the American public are, and starting to talk about things that frankly only confuse the public, only cause a sense of exhaustion about this whole thing, and don't talk about some of the bread and butter issues that President Trump wants to be fighting over in Pennsylvania with Joe Biden on some of these bread and butter issues like jobs. And so I think it is a real factor here. But Nancy Pelosi at the same time also got a real gift in that ruling yesterday on the accounting firm associated with the president. It is really important that that judge said impeachment is not the only way. I think, had he not said that, it would have been harder for her to make that argument. And I think particularly after Justin Amash kind of created this veneer of bipartisanship around the impeachment question, I think it would have been very difficult for her. But the problem is that Justin Amash is still alone. It's been days since, it's been over 24 hours since he made that call. He is still alone. Republicans are not defecting on President Trump. And I think that core political dynamic just hasn't changed.
Oh, not only is he alone, he's being marginalized and isolated by the House Freedom Caucus, which is what he helped found. So, I mean, by his very cohort, he is being marginalized, and we'll just see, and now he's being primaried, and so we'll see what happens. But I do want to talk, Jeffrey, about what was supposed to happen this morning with Judiciary. John McGahn, White House counsel, was supposed to be going. They subpoenaed him. And they have more questions about whether or not he was asked to obstruct justice, basically. And he has decided that he will not go. And here's his rationale, and I want you to hear your thoughts on this. His lawyers say that he is, quote, facing contradictory instructions from two co-equal branches of government. So, meaning, the president is telling him not to go, Congress is telling him he must go and subpoenaing him, he's deciding to go with the president. Is there any legal path for what was right here?
Well, I mean, I certainly think he's getting good legal advice. I don't think that is a unreasonable position for his lawyers to take. What he's saying is let the court sort it out, and because what's going to happen here is he's going to be held in contempt, and one side or the other is going to go to court to try to resolve the question. I mean, McGahn is in a sort of impossible situation now, and he is going to wait for guidance from the courts. I think and that's where a lot of these things are going to wind up, and these could be long legal battles. I mean, even the one that's over, the one with the accounting firm, is just beginning the appellate process.
What have the court said in the past about the reach of executive privilege here, though? What have they said about people who have worked in the White House, their ability to testify?
You know, this is a genuinely unresolved question. There was one district court opinion that said Harriet Miers, who was the White House counsel, same job as McGahn, had to testify in a congressional investigation. That was never appealed. The parties reached a settlement.
Oh, jeez.
So that's one line of case. That's one precedent. There are many legal opinions within the Justice Department, and that was reflected in the
welcome, viewer.
opinion that came out yesterday that said there is no obligation on the part
Feel
of
free to say hello in the chat.
someone at that level to testify about conversations with the president. The legal issue in the accounting firm is an easy one. I mean, the Congress is clearly right on that one. The one on Don McGahn is a lot more complicated, and I could definitely see courts going either way on that.
Jeffrey, David, Abby, thank you all very much.
Moving on,
Well, CNN has learned that some House Democrats in a closed-door meeting pressed Speaker Nancy Pelosi to begin impeachment hearings against President Trump. They say that the stonewalling from the White House has just hit a breaking point.
Let me be clear. If Don McGahn doesn't testify, it is time to open an impeachment inquiry. The president has engaged in an ongoing effort to impede our ability to find the truth, to collect evidence, to do our work. And this is preventing us really from ultimately finding the facts.
Democratic Congresswoman Jackie Speier is on the Oversight Committee, and she joins us now. Great to see you, Congresswoman.
Hi, Allison.
Okay, as of last night, there were these closed-door meetings. Apparently, there was a pretty heated debate. It went on for a long time. Do you think that Congress is closer this morning to beginning impeachment inquiries than they were yesterday?
I actually think there's a growing sense of frustration with the unwillingness of the administration to let us do our job. Because as members of Congress, we don't only legislate, we have a responsibility to perform oversight functions over the executive branch. And if the president insists on preventing persons from testifying before Congress, he is frustrating the equal co-branch of government.
And does that growing frustration lead you to believe that you are heading in the direction of an impeachment inquiry?
I believe that an inquiry into impeachment is required at this point in time. You know, this is no longer a political question. This is a constitutional question. And we have an obligation to make sure that our role, that George Mason in the founding of our Constitution talked about this inquisitorial function and our responsibilities to oversee those in public office, is not deterred. And right now, the president is doing everything to sabotage our role. And once Trump, it's all about breaking the law and then litigating it. And that's, I think, what he's trying to do here.
So you do not agree with Speaker Pelosi to pump the brakes. She seems to believe that the court system is working. Congress just got a victory yesterday from that financial accounting firm. So she's saying that now is not a good time for impeachment.
So I believe that we have an obligation to take the Mueller report. It is a roadmap to look at the issue of obstruction of justice. It appears, based on the Mueller report, that numerous times the president asked Don McGahn to get rid of Bob Mueller. He has to come to Congress and talk about that. You cannot assert executive privilege if it's in communications associated with trying to commit a crime. So Don McGahn is not on strong footing in this regard, but this will go through the courts, yes, and it may take months and months and months, and that's precisely what the president wants to happen.
Well, since you are inclined towards beginning an impeachment inquiry, do you think that Speaker Pelosi can be persuaded?
I think that over time we're going to find ourselves in that position. Now, I don't know that we're going to do any more than lay out the facts for the American people in the House, and then rather than relying Senate to take up the impeachment process to make that decision at the ballot box in November of 20.
Said that he sees grounds for impeachment. He sees conduct by the president. I'm wondering, have you spoken to Congressman Amash about this?
No, I haven't. And Justin Amash has really been a very independent voice in Congress, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. You will oftentimes see him vote no, and virtually everyone else votes yes. He has a very strong sense of purpose, and, you know, it takes a lot of time to read that report. Those are
what seems to be the heart of the matter. There's still a lot of questions about the Trump Tower in Moscow, and some theorize that this is why Donald Trump, when he was a candidate, did Moscow project was still ongoing, and Donald Trump stood to make millions and millions of dollars from it if he got Vladimir Putin's permission to build it. And that came up. You all just released the transcript from this closed-door meeting with Michael Cohen, in which Michael Cohen basically admits he lied to Congress. And so I will read this. Chairman Adam Schiff says, just to be perfectly clear about this, the statement about the Trump Tower Moscow negotiations ending in January that was part of your original draft was false. And Mr. Sekulow, of course the president's lawyer, knew it was false. Michael Cohen says, yes, sir. What do you think comes out of that moment?
Well, what comes out of that moment and many others during that interview is that Mr. Sekulow and Mr. Lowell, attorneys for both the president and his children, were obstructing justice. They were clearly setting out a narrative that was false. They knew it was false. Michael Cohen said he talked to Jay Sekulow, I think, 10 or 15 times about his statement. He said in code, stay strong, stay on message, the president loves you. I mean, those are words that a mafia boss would say to someone who is doing their dirty work.
I want to turn now to a much more personal matter. And you shared on Twitter the fact that you had an abortion. And I want to read to you what you shared this week. You said, hashtag, you know me, I had an abortion. It was the best choice for my family. And while it was a mentally hard decision, I don't regret it. Wondering why you felt compelled to make such a personal statement public.
Well, I actually spoke on the House floor back in
2011. Yes, I knew that, but I mean, somehow Twitter seems actually even more of an announcement somehow.
And, you know, it was a second trimester abortion. The fetus had dropped through the cervix and into the vagina. It was a painful process, and it was, you know, incumbent on me to do it at that time. The fetus was not going to survive outside of the womb. And I was particularly unnerved by my colleagues, Republican men who had never endured that experience, to talk about it in such a cavalier way, to somehow suggest that this is something you do just without any thought. It was painful. It's painful for every woman. And I think what you're witnessing now across this country is, you know, this is a decision that a woman makes in conjunction with her family and her physician. And the government has no right in my uterus, has no right in my vagina, and it's time for us to be very clear and straightforward about that.
And why do you think that in this particular cultural moment it does seem as though women are somehow being depicted as monsters? I mean, why do you feel that that narrative
having a child resides with the woman? And, you know, if we are going to start regulating women and their reproductive health, well, maybe we should start regulating men and their reproductive health. I mean, this has gotten quite absurd, and I think Alabama is just one more example of the many states that have now passed laws to treat women as if they do not have control over their own bodies.
Congresswoman Jackie Speier, we really appreciate the candid conversation that you have with us here on New Day. Thank you very much. John.
All right, people who work in the...
Don't forget, Biden deserted you. He's not from Pennsylvania. I guess he was born here, but he left you, folks. He left you for another state.
President Donald Trump going after Democratic frontrunner Joe Biden in his home state of Pennsylvania, as John pointed out. I think Joe Biden was...
His parents, unless he was going to run away, it's not like he had a choice in the matter. His family moved.
He should have run away and stayed in Pennsylvania.
Father moved for a job.
Will these kinds of attacks have any impact, or could they actually somehow be elevating Biden in the crowded Democratic field? Let's bring in CNN political director David Chalian for today's Bottom Line. David, we are told that the president's advisors say he should stop going after Joe Biden, but he doesn't seem inclined to do that.
Yes, he clearly isn't heeding that advice at all. And I understand the temptation for the president, right, Allison? Joe Biden is this dominant frontrunner in the Democratic primary polls right now, and Donald Trump is not somebody that in politics is ever going to want to sort of sit back and wait and see. He is so eager to engage, and so he is sort of shunning that advice. I don't think it's fear of elevating Joe Biden necessarily. I think what his advisors are really concerned about is like that there are 22 other people who are poised to start beating up Joe Biden, and Donald Trump doesn't need to do this right now. He clearly feels otherwise.
Every word that the president said last night and all the body language and the tone indicated to me that he thinks Joe Biden is a risk, specifically in Pennsylvania. It was interesting to hear that play out. David, I want to talk to you about where you are today, which is Des Moines, Iowa, and why you're there, which is for the CNN Town Hall tonight with former Congressman Beto O'Rourke. This is a big moment for the former congressman.
he needs this to go well. Yeah, he does. I mean, anytime one of these candidates steps onto a national stage like at a CNN town hall, faces voters' questions one by one on all the issues before that big national audience, that is obviously a very important moment. I think you are right, John, though. It is even a bit more important right now for Beto O'Rourke because he splashed onto the scene and then has obviously faded since. I think Buttigieg has stolen some of his fire in this race, and I think O'Rourke now is on a mission to build something back. He's had very impressive staff hires. He's building a real operation, and there's no doubt that he is anything but done in this race yet, but he has slipped. And so he has to have a moment now, both for, I think, sort of his media narrative to donors, supporters, and most importantly to voters, that he's got a long-term sustainability plan to stay in this race all the way through.
All right, David, I want to ask you about President Trump seeming angry with his favorite TV station. Watch this.
What's going on with Fox, by the way? What's going on there? They're putting more Democrats on than you have Republicans. And something strange is going on at Fox, though. Something very strange.
Well, of course President Trump is confused, David. He doesn't understand why Fox would even attempt to be even-handed during this presidential race by
people who theoretically know all these things. But I think the most important thing to watch is that the president that we showed I was explicitly spotted on the president and Biden. He's laying, I mean, he's basically interfering in these investigations in front of us in plain daylight. He's saying, this happened. This is what I expected these to find. This is where I want to go. I think that's a very dangerous.
Calling it treason and comes along jail sentence.
I mean, he's already prejudged the entire thing. So if you're Barr and your job is to keep an open mind to look at this, and the president has said, I know what happened, and this is what I want to have happen, that's going to really, call into question what the end point is for Barr and what he does with any findings he ends up with.
Joyce, I just, in my infinite curiosity about Rod Rosenstein, how did Rod Rosenstein become the guy whose signature is on those FISA applications, who pushed back against the president's allies in Congress for his entire 2-year tenure, to a guy who on the way out slimes and smears Jim Comey, quotes Donald Trump about the rule of law, and walks out, all in with Donald J. Trump? What is it that Jim Comey said in his offense for the Times about eating people's souls a bite at a time? I think what Rod Rosenstein will say when he writes the history of this era is that he made those legal decisions straight up the middle, based along the law and the facts. That's why he signed off on the FISAs. That's why he selected Bob Mueller.
Welcome, viewer. Feel free to say hello in the chat.
But at some point, something happened. And a man who spent a lot of time thinking, talking, writing about the rule of law decided that Donald Trump personified the rule of law.
Fucking hot in this
That's
house.
really tough to understand. Choice fans, thank you for spending some time with us. If anyone can make sense of it, you can. After the break, Mayor Pete versus Vice President Pence, round 2. That's next.
We knew you were eavesdropping. That's what my friend said. All that was on purpose. We're not gay. Not that there's anything wrong with it.
No, of course not.
I mean, it's fine if that's who you are.
Absolutely.
I mean, I've many gay friends.
My father's gay.
Clip today when we heard of this from the president.
We've got the town hall with Pete Buttigieg. There you go. This weekend. Just one thing on him. Putting aside policy disagreements, don't you think it's just great to see the fact that you've got a guy there on the stage with his husband, and it's normal. It's not.
I think it's absolutely fine. I do.
But isn't it a sign of great progress in the country that that's just?
Yeah, I think it's great. I think that's something that perhaps some people will have a problem with. I have no problem with it whatsoever. I think it's good.
Trump getting ahead of Mayor Pete's town hall on Fox this weekend, where he'll surely face questions about his war of words with the vice president. And Buttigieg got some practice for that this morning with conservative radio host Hugh Hewitt.
If only the Democrats were ruthless enough to make an issue of Trump supporting gay marriage.
I don't know what's in his heart. He's always been polite to me in person. So, if you're in public office and you advance homophobic policies,
On some level, it doesn't matter whether you do that out of political calculation or whether you do it out of sincere belief. The problem is it's hurting other people.
Joining our conversation, former Chief of Staff to Vice Presidents Joe Biden and Al Gore, Ron Klain, and with us on set, the Rev. Al Sharpton, host of Politics Nation here on MSNBC and president of the National Action Network. We cover Pete Buttigieg because he does interesting things, and that was interesting. Going on Hugh Hewitt's radio show and standing firm on Vice President Pence's positions and advancing homophobic policies, and even
Al Sharpton has lost a lot of weight.
Wing, I don't know who that interview was with, but talking about the progress that's been made. He's forcing some interesting conversations.
No, I think he does. I think he forces very interesting conversations and challenging ones. When I took him to Harlem to Sylvia's, it was to say, even in the middle of the African American community, which does have a lot of people that are homophobic, we wanted to say that here's a major candidate who's openly gay, and that he should be given the hearing and respect like anyone else. And people came out and rallied around that. I think that he's raising a very important issue in terms of opening that door to where Americans have to deal with openly gay candidates for the highest office in the land should not be in any way judged any different than anyone else. And it's one thing to say it, it's another when you have someone as intelligent, as clear on the policies, and who has seemingly picking up the steam that he has as a live candidate. And I think he's done that.
He's struggling with African American voters. Do you think it's around a set of policies? Do you think it's around name ID, or do you think it's around what you just described?
I think it's all of the above. I mean, I think that a lot of it is name ID. They don't know him. They don't have experiences with him. But I'd be lying if I didn't say there were some parts of this country in the black community that are still homophobic, which is why I wanted to take the position I did. And I think everyone should. You have to remember when President Obama came out with same-sex marriage, there was a lot of pushback. In 2003, when I was getting ready to run and said I was for same-sex marriage, I had ministers that I grew up preaching who would say, you can't come to my church for a while till this cools off. So let's not be in any way dishonest about this. We have in every community to have to deal with it, and deal with it we must. And I think, man, Pete is helping us do that.
You know what? I can't believe we haven't had this conversation yet, but you cannot win the Democratic nomination without support from African American women, for sure, and without doing better among African American men than your opponents. Is that insurmountable? That sort of built?
No, because I think the more we come out with it, the more you make it clear that you can't have civil rights for anybody unless you have for everybody. And if you have bias for anybody, you justify the bias against you. And the thing I've said, even in churches, is guess what? To when you raise the question of black women voters, is every gay person has a mother. You're talking about your child, your niece, your nephew. So let's get over and play games with this. This is life, whether you agree with it or not. And there's things in your life that are natural to you that people don't agree with.
Ron Klain, I want
Amen.
your thoughts on all of this. Jump in.
Well, so, I'm a Hoosier, grew up in Indiana, my family's still there, and I can tell you that for the 4 years that Mike Pence was the governor of Indiana, it was a state that was known for two things: the most harsh anti-abortion laws in the country, and the most harsh anti-LGBT laws in the country.
Yeah.
Laws that were so extreme that the very conservative Indianapolis Star ran a front-page editorial attacking Governor Pence and telling him he needed to change his position and get those laws repealed. So I think it's important that when Mayor Pete is talking about this, he's not talking about something abstract or kind of something, one-off. He's talking about a systematic effort that Mike Pence had as governor of Indiana to pass these incredibly harsh, restrictive laws. And so there's a lot of history here. There's a lot of sad reality here. And it's good to hear Mayor Pete talking about that and speaking up about that.
Ron, you always slip me into my former brain as an operative, and I wonder if there's talk among operatives to really try to paint Trump and Pence as the extremists that at a policy level they very clearly are. We've been having a debate this week about abortion. You're absolutely right about Mike Pence's record. Frankly, it was part of what attracted Donald Trump to him in that VP race. For better or worse, I would say for worse. But is there talk? Is there a strategic value to take some of these, I think, really scary for all women moves in state legislatures around
reproductive freedoms, to take what you're talking about. I mean, is Buttigieg onto something by coming back to Vice President Pence's extremism?
Well, I think Mayor Pete is, and I think this is an imperative, not just about Pence, but about Trump himself, as you mentioned, Nicole. I mean, one thing Donald Trump got away with in 2016 was having this urbane image as a worker while he was saying he was going to block punishment for getting abortions and would appoint the Supreme Court to overturn Roe v. Wade. I think he was able to have it both ways in 2016. I think a lot of maybe suburban people said, oh, Donald Trump, he won't really do that. He's just playing for the Christian conservative vote. And I think it's imperative that the Democrats running for president in 2020 make sure the voters know and hold Donald Trump accountable for this big move to the right. And what we're seeing in the states, what we're seeing in Alabama and Ohio and all these other states right now is the direct result of Donald Trump saying we should punish women, and of Donald Trump saying we will reverse Roe versus Wade, and then putting two justices on the Supreme Court to do that. And the Democrats have to do a better job in 2020 than they did in 2016 of putting it at Donald Trump's feet.
All right, no one's going anywhere. Coming soon to a courtroom near you. Breaking news in the fight for Donald Trump's tax returns. Next. A potentially historic court fight over the president's tax returns. Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin just told the House Ways and Means Committee he's refusing to comply with a subpoena for 6 years of Trump's tax returns. They were due tonight. Committee Chairman Richard Neal now previewing a legal battle that he says could be in court as early as next week. This is the whole strategy to give them nothing.
On every front, on all the investigations of the White House, the president, the reinvestigation of the Russia probe, give them nothing. And I think what they're basically saying is if you want this stuff, impeach. And that's your only recourse. We're not gonna, the actual argument whether doesn't really matter. They'll come up with words and arguments. There's basically nothing at all unless you want to impeach us.
So I worked in the White House and was investigated by Henry Waxman and many others all the time, and we produce documents to avoid just this. I think this could be a scenario of be careful what you wish for.
Maybe. I mean, it's an open question. So far, it has been a pretty politically successful strategy for this White House. They're absolutely giving up nothing. There's a calculation that court battles take a long time, and they may not be adjudicated until after 2020. And if what you care about is the election, which is what everyone cares about, it sort of kicks that issue down the road. And, in a real way, they're sort of forcing, they're kind of daring, as Nick said, the Democrats to impeach them. And you were even seeing the Democrats starting to go down that road. I mean, Nancy Pelosi is being very deft about that, but there is a world in which now Democrats are talking about impeachment not as a political strategy, but actually as a document gathering strategy, because it turns sort of Congress into a grand jury, and they're able to get documents and witness testimony in a way that they can't right now in this situation.
But Donald Trump is always a bully on the playground who says, if you can, then when you get him, he cries, and he's like, no. I mean, I think it's a taunt, but if they call his bluff, I don't think he's going to enjoy being impeached.
He said,
No, I don't think he's going to enjoy it, but I think that you've got to look at, aside from the whole bully kind of personality, he knows what's in the documents. It may be very well. He said, I lose more fighting, I lose less fighting than if they get the documents, because he knows what we all don't know, and he knows what could hurt him. And that's what I think the Democrats ought to be saying, is you really can't afford for us to get the document, because maybe there's some very interesting reasons why only one bank would lend you money and why you have to make certain decisions. I think what they're not doing is pinning the tail on the donkey here, saying and start suggesting, why don't you want to give us the documents, Mr. Trump? You want to talk about everything else. You tweet in the middle of the night, you call TV shows. Why are you hiding this? And that is what I think would get under his skin.
You mean maybe there was a reason he was on a first-name basis with Russia. Russia, you listening? Talking about our loan. All right, coming up, wait until you hear what Donald Trump has planned for his big, beautiful slats.
And
Washington Post out with just some extraordinary reporting on how Donald Trump is micromanaging his border walls design. The bollards, or slats as he prefers to call them, should be painted flat black, a dark hue that would absorb heat in the summer, making the metal too hot for climbers to scale. One design Trump panned
ground, according to former official, was topped by a rounded barrel-like metal cylinder to prevent climbing, but the president doesn't like the way it looks either, arguing that sharp spikes would appear more intimidating. Trump told one group of aides that the metal points would cut the hands of climbers. Function as a more effective deterrent on the table effect. So if any kid in any high school wrote that, they'd be sent to the school trained. I mean, this is sadistic.
Well, this is a president. This goes through his two things. One is it just shows his attention to detail on issues that he cares about, and there's not a wide range of issues he cares about. You hear any sort of gaming, they're going to come in and they're doing a policy briefing and they have charts and pictures and ways to engage the president, and then you take something like this and he wants to micromanage every detail down to the shade of the paint and the shape of the spike, and it also gets to his base turnout strategy and frankly his real views on immigration. This is someone who feels this very strongly, this restrictionist view, this tough view. For him to say, I want the bollard slats to burn people, I want the spikes to impale him, it sort of gives you a sense of, well, there is that push and pull. Is he going to go with the Kushner plan? Is he going to go with the Stephen Miller plan? At the end of the day, that's kind of where his gut and his heart is, and if he ever has to make a choice, it is going to be that tough, hardline choice.
But Ron, we also know that he wants to burn and impale people.
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, he is cruel, as Ashley said, but he's also completely incompetent. I mean, if you really want to control immigration to our country, then pass comprehensive immigration reform, work on the economic issues in Central and South America, spending time playing exterior decorator for a vanity wall that is not going to make our border any safer isn't doing anything about the problem. And if the president wants to wake up the Secretary of Homeland Security at 6 o'clock in the morning with phone calls, he ought to be calling her and asking her why children are in cages and why children aren't reunited with their families, and not debating which shade of black he's going to paint his fantasy wall.
No, I think it's exactly right. This, first of all, it's about immigration, as Ashley said. This is sort of his number one mandate, but it's also the attention to detail for things he cares about, whether it's the wall, whether it was the color of the fabric and the carpet at Trump Tower, or the 4th of July celebration this summer in Washington.
All right, but he also is an optics man. Yeah. He wants to send the hard messages, not just enough that I'm hard on it, I want to look like I'm hard on it.
All right, we have to sneak in a break. We'll be right back.
No, Ben. Hey, this is amazing. Moderate to severe ulcerative.
My thanks to Ron, Jonathan, the Rev, Ashley, and Nick, and to all of you for watching. That does it for this hour. I'll see you back here Monday for Deadline White House at 4 p.m. Hi, everyone. It's 4 o'clock in New York. This is what obstruction of justice looks like. 2 pieces of evidence that a federal judge has ordered to be made public could impact public opinion about the obstruction of justice investigation into Donald Trump. That investigation looked into Trump's efforts to thwart the Russia probe and ended with special counsel Robert Mueller saying he could not exonerate the president.
Welcome, viewer. Please feel free to say hello in the chats. I was just thinking, I wish I had somebody to talk to.
Contemplated when he wrote that he could not say the president hadn't committed crimes. That evidence includes a transcript of a phone call that stood in the center of the FBI's investigation into Michael Flynn, and a transcript of a call between the president's lawyer, John Dowd, and Flynn's lawyer. The Washington Post writes it up like this, quote, a federal judge on Thursday ordered that prosecutors make public a transcript of a phone call that former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn tried hard to hide with a lie. His conversation with the Russian ambassador in late 2016. U.S. District Judge Emmett G. Sullivan in Washington ordered the government also to provide a public transcript of a
I miss my wife.
2017 voicemail involving Flynn.
Miss my kids.
In that sensitive call, President Trump's attorney left a message for Flynn's attorney reminding him of
I just keep on playing back in my head all the things I wish I could have done better for him.
Cooperating with federal investigators. Together, those 2 pieces of evidence, which may even lead to the release of the actual audio tapes of those calls, could impact the public's understanding of the misconduct detailed in the dense 488-page Mueller report, which describes how the president's most senior national security advisor discussed deals with Russians that he would later lie about. Also a call in which the president's lawyer is clearly probing whether Flynn had implicated the president,
and asked for a heads up if Flynn planned to do so. It's the kind of evidence that's behind the brazen, coordinated White House and DOJ strategy of stonewalling Congress. It's also the kind of evidence that may recast Attorney General William Barr's decision to exonerate Donald Trump as being at odds with Mueller's ultimate conclusions on obstruction if Mueller himself ever testifies. From last night's court filing, quote, the defendant, Mike Flynn, informed the government of multiple instances, both before and after his guilty plea, where either he or his attorneys received communications from persons connected to the administration or Congress that could have affected both his willingness to cooperate and the completeness of that cooperation. And that is where we start today with some of our favorite reporters and friends. Former U.S. Attorney Joyce Vance is here. With us on set, Associated Press White House reporter Jonathan Lemire, Ashley Parker, White House reporter for the Washington Post at the table, and Nick Compassori, political reporter for the New York Times. Four overtired parents at the table. What could go wrong on a Friday? White House.
Well, it really could, and if we ever get to the point where there are witnesses testifying up on the House side, and where documents are turned over so that Congress can begin to take a look at them, they could be very dangerous for the president, or at least how quickly he goes to the mattresses on Twitter suggests that. And that, I think, explains this White House's strategy of fighting every subpoena, fighting every effort for disclosure. We may not know exactly what the problems the president has are, but it seems very clear that whether they're financial problems, whether they're contact with Russia problems, that his administration, and maybe frankly his practices over decades, are so rife with corruption that they simply can't withstand.
Welcome, viewer. Please do say hello in the chats.
The president tweeted this morning that someone should have warned him about Mike Flynn. I think the list of people who did is longer than the list of people who didn't. I only know of Jared Kushner who didn't. This was the president's tweet, and now it seems General Flynn was under investigation long before it was common knowledge.
It's not a sleep stream without a boner.
But if that was the case, whatever, I'm not going to read the rest of it. Why wasn't I told? Chris Christie told him and basically lost his job as head of the transition.
Well, then I guess I'm a poser, aren't I?
Obama told him. Joe Biden was in the office when that happened. I think plenty of people warned him about Mike Flynn.
But yes, welcome back yourself.
I told Don McGahn, we can watch that again.
We felt like it was critical that we get this information to the White House because, in part because the vice president was unknowingly making false statements to the public, and because we believed that General Flynn was compromised with respect to the Russians.
So, I mean, General Flynn was like a boyfriend. They're like literally everybody warned him about. He dated him anyway.
Which is also what happens usually with the bad boy.
Always, literally.
Traction to the bad boyfriend. I mean, look, it's one of the many mysteries of Trump is why was he so drawn to have this guy in his cabinet and give him so much power? And I've heard versions and theories about it that, look, they shared views on Islam and Muslims, and that was an animating idea for Trump.
They hail from the lunatic right? There are plenty other lunatics that
But somebody who had that, and also he was rejected by Obama, which was actually a plus in Trump's mind. And just the fact that everybody was telling him not to do it. And we know from this president, he kind of likes zigging when everyone else is zagging. I don't know what the right answer is. I've heard all those theories advanced.
There's also a new bit of information that Flynn was encouraged by people close to the president and Congress. Any theories on who in Congress was telling Flynn not to cooperate?
There are theories probably that it would be irresponsible to share with no reporting, but to me that was actually one of the most intriguing lines in that report because there's other stuff, but it was already in the Mueller report. We already knew about the phone call, but this was the first time, if I'm remembering correctly, you had any explanation that anyone on Capitol Hill was involved in that, and that to me is absolutely fascinating.
Well, it also connects a dot. For me, again, we don't know who it was, and it isn't revealed who it is, but it connects a dot. I mean, there is a multi-pronged effort.
It sucked. I wound up going to the wrong place at first. Because when they called me to verify my appointment, I asked them which place to go to. And apparently I did not communicate clearly, or they didn't communicate clearly. Because they got a separate place where you do your intake from where you do your appointments. So I went back to the intake place, which is closer. But I was supposed to go to the other place, which turns out is a lot further.
helping hand to the White House to try to get them ahead of the game on these probes, to try to slow them down, at the most generous reading of that. And I think that is, these are questions that will hopefully be answered in the weeks to come. I mean, this is a story that's a lot of tentacles, is still sprawling, and you're right. I mean, the president's affection for Flynn is well known. I mean, the theories you have all floated are right, I think, but also that Flynn was there day after day on the campaign trail, was his attack dog, and let's remember, it is constant traveling companion.
But I got a new medication.
Let's also remember that Flynn was the one who
I got my dose changed and refilled on my existing medication.
Because now all of this information came out in the context of Flynn's sentencing, where he's hoping not to be locked up himself. After the break, Donald Trump turns up the volume on his false claim that he was spied on, something his hand-picked FBI director says he's seen no evidence of. The president's War on Justice, the Friday edition. Also ahead, Buttigieg on Mike Pence's support for homophobic policies as he preps for a Fox News town.
So I got an anxiety medication, I got a mood stabilizer, and now I've got an antidepressant called Effexor. It's been around for a long time. And I hope it fucking helps. I don't see how it's going to. I got a fucking situational depression problem, not just... Top White House officials have briefed Congress on Iran. That's CBS News. They're a bitch about their copyrights.
Valvoline is the only motor oil brand with a dedicated engine lab.
Welcome, viewer number 2. Feel free to say hello in the chats.
We test everything. We test seal conditioners to keep older engines from leaking. We test...
Okay guys, so today's video we're going to be online in the Persian Gulf server. Let's see what we can get today.
Airborne, Gears.
Cool. You can go lay down.
Lots of dirt today. Okay, so this is the server. This is the new Persian Gulf server. It's my second server. The first one is the Caucasus one, and this is the Persian Gulf. We launched it a couple of days ago, and I designed a whole new mission for it. So if you guys are interested in flying it, if you like the first server, and you have the Persian Gulf now, this is a cool little thing to come try out. So here we go. We're airborne here.
Dingo, lay down.
I'll tell you guys a little bit about the scenario as we go, but essentially it's an Iranian invasion of the UAE, and American forces and NATO were caught off guard. The Iranian-Russian forces invaded the south of the UAE, and it's a red aggression NATO defense mission, essentially. Okay, so we're just gonna fly around like this and just see if AWACS can vector us onto any targets that we can go after. Up in front of us here, this is the UAE, Dubai, up ahead. It's currently held by NATO forces, but we're going to try to take that over.
And then I grabbed a fly like it was a flea.
We're going to do some patrols over that area and just see if there's any NATO
Squishy.
aircraft. I just want to look over the ocean here. Anybody who ends up engaging an F-14 over the water is going to be in some serious trouble here. So you can see those smoke plumes off in the distance. There's already some combat going on down there. Looks like a pretty clear day though. $264 for 122,000. So that puts them around El Dafra Air Force Base, I believe. So we're gonna go ahead and see if we can pick them up here. $175 for 140 at 40,000. That's more than likely their AWACS.
I got some dirt at 9 o'clock. I got some dirt at 5 o'clock. And dirt, 8 o'clock. And dirt, 12 o'clock.
Lots of air defenses in this area. Let's get a bogey dope. .096 for 30 at 4,000. That's our priority target here. So we're gonna head 096.
Oh, whatever. Why did India choose the Rafale over more Su-30s?
Of requests from the viewers on why India chose to buy Rafale instead of increasing the number of Sukhoi 30 MKI, which is a very capable fighter. It is well known that Sukhoi Su-30 MKI, $75 million apiece, costs one-third that of Rafale, and India also has got excellent understanding of Su-30 MKI, having used it for some time now. In this video, we look at top 5 reasons why India chose to have Rafale instead of having more Sukhoi 30 MKI. Sukhoi Su-30 MKI is designed for air dominance. Su-30 MKI aerodynamic configuration is geared for air-to-air combat. The design allows for high angle of attack flights. The integral aerodynamic configuration combined with thrust vectoring results in extreme maneuverability. It is not that Su-30 MKI is not capable of ground attack, but it more of an air fighter. The Su-30 MKI has a range of 3,000 kilometers with internal fuel which ensures a 3.75-hour combat mission. Its air refueling system can increase the flight duration up to 10 hours with a range of 8,000 kilometers. Su-30 MKI can also use the Cobham 754 refueling pods. This means Su-30 MKI can go deep into enemy territories and take the fight to the opposing air force. The Rafale is referred to as an omniroll aircraft, so its maker. Equipped with a wide range of weapons, the Rafale is intended to perform air supremacy, interdiction, aerial reconnaissance, ground support, in-depth strike, anti-ship strike and nuclear deterrence missions. One important aspect is that Rafale can be used from carrier aircrafts, making it a very versatile fighter. As viewers may know, MMR-CDU, in which Rafale 1 stands for Medium Multi-Role Combat Aircraft. So India's intention was to acquire a multi-role fighter instead of the air dominance fighter, which India already has in form of Su-30 MKI. Sukhoi 30 MKI is a large aircraft, and was also not designed with stealth in mind. The size has many benefits, but has a critical disadvantage. It has large RCS of 5. This makes it an easier target when compared to Rafale, which has a RCS of 1. So, in case of operations in regions defended by advanced air defense system with powerful radars, the Rafale is a much better aircraft. France is part of European Union, but it does not use Eurofighter Typhoon. France was humiliated in World War II. Since then, France has been very particular about building its own defense equipments, be it fighters or submarines. It is also known to have a very independent view about strategic relationships. This is very important, as France can be trusted that it will not bow to foreign pressures to stop supplies, if and when India is in a conflict. India's experience with France has been good. It has been a very dependable partner for India. India has been using Mirage built by Dassault for a long time, and it has been a very effective jet for India. From spare parts to repairs, France has stood by India. Russia has been the most trusted ally of India. It helped India in 1971 war, when US, UK, Pakistan had tried to defeat India. Russia has supplied India and continuing to do so, with top-of-the-line defense equipment. In late 1990s, Russia had transferred technology for Su-30 MKI, India's frontline fighter aircraft, which at that time was Russia's most modern equipment, its most modern plane. Recently, Russia has agreed to sell India S-400, the most dreaded air defense system in the world. There is mainly one problem with Russia, that India must not be dependent on a single nation for the military equipments. There is a saying, do not put all your eggs in the same basket. Diversifying of military equipment is must.
Number 1.
China, India's main adversary, also uses Sukhoi flanker variants, which it had acquired from Russia. They have even reverse engineered these aircrafts. Though Su-30MKI is customized by India with Israeli and French subsystems, China have decent idea of this aircraft, especially its aerodynamic capabilities. In any conflict, this can be very useful from Chinese perspective. Same goes for India. On the other hand, there is currently no roadmap where Rafale can enter into Chinese hands. This will give India an edge in air combat scenarios.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more videos like this. Hit the like button if you find the video interesting. Kindly provide your feedback in the comment section. This will help us.
I don't really have anything to talk about at the moment. Got my mind pleasantly clear. I'm just kind of pissed off about how hot it is in this fucking house. Fucking AC is just not working well in here. Hope it cools down more than this tonight. This is fucking pitiful. I'm sweating just sitting here.
reports in a meeting on December 5th, 2018, representatives from Japan's ruling Liberal Democratic Party and its coalition partner, Kamito, agreed to acquire 99 Lockheed Martin F-35s. These will replace Boeing F-15s, acquired in the 1980s, and not compatible to further upgrades. Mitsubishi Heavy Industries will manufacture Japan's F-35s on license. Mitsubishi also built Japan's F-4s and F-15s and F-2s, which are a variant of Lockheed's F-16. The new F-35s will augment the fleet of around 63 F-2s and around 100 F-15 jets. These F-15s have been deemed suitable for upgrade and going through multi-stage improvement programs. 88 of these have already been updated to have Link 16 data links and will see many other enhancements. As per Japan's defense budget, about $500 billion has been set aside for this. Japan's F-35s will provide a major boost to the country's air power as it's a proper fifth-generation fighter with decent stealth profile. China is still struggling with its Chengdu J-20 fighter, which is supposed to be the main rival of F-35s in case of a conflict with Japan. Chinese J-20 use Russian AL-31F engines, which is the predecessor of AL-41F1, as it has struggled to make an indigenous engine suitable for a fifth-generation aircraft. Also, the stealth capability of the Chinese J-20 is suspect. Reports have emerged that a Sukhoi Su-30 MKI of the Indian Air Force managed to detect the Chinese Chengdu J-20 jet fighter. Indian Air Force Commander Arun Chara said, "The Sukhoi's radar can see them. The new Chinese jets are not so invisible after all. No special technology is required to detect the J-20, as it can be detected by ordinary radar stations." The fact that the disclosures come from the official source makes it authentic. It remains to be seen which variant of F-35 Japan acquires, as there's been reports of it planning to upgrade the two Izumo-class helicopter carrier into a full-fledged aircraft carrier by adding F-35Bs, which is a stolen, short takeoff vertical landing variant. Chinese behavior has pushed Japan to the wall, and it's now responding to the threat. If Japan decides to deploy F-35s in its Izumo-class warships, it'll mark a tectonic shift in policy. This will have a far-reaching impact, which will have repercussions not only in Asia-Pacific, but also at the international level.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more videos like this. Hit the like button. Find the video interesting.
Hold on, I just got a message.
Feedback in the comment section. This will help us improve.
President Trump's threat to strike North Korea with fire and fury has prompted Pyongyang to claim it is carefully examining a plan to hit Guam with missiles. Since it became an American territory in 1898, Guam has been considered a vital asset by Washington. It lies in the Pacific, east of the Philippines, and around 1,700 miles south of North Korea. Its proximity to China, Japan, and the Korean Peninsula, and the U.S. a launching pad into Asia, and as such, it has been built up into a military fortress. In this video, defense updates look at how powerful U.S. forces in Guam are and provide 5 reasons why an attack on it will be very costly for North Korea. The U.S. runs a naval base and Coast Guard stations to the south of the island, as well as an Air Force base in the north, which was regularly used during the Vietnam War. So,
Guam is protected both ways. Based at the station are around 7,000 U.S. troops. The bases cover 30% of the entire island, which is roughly the size of Chicago and has a population of 162,000. Since the bases are dispersed throughout the island, it cannot be easily targeted. While it gives the U.S. the capability to launch strikes in Asia, Guam also serves an important defense function for Washington and its allies. It has robust anti-air defense batteries and excellent stock of ammunition. Naval Base Guam is the home port for 4 nuclear-powered fast attack submarines and 2 submarine support vessels. The Virginia class, also known as the SSN 774 class, is a class of nuclear-powered fast attack submarines. The submarines are designed for broad spectrum of open ocean and literal shallow coastal water missions. Virginia class is designed to take out enemy surface vessels, submarines, as well as strike ground targets. For anti-ship role, it's equipped with Harpoon missile. For anti-submarine role, it has Mk-48 torpedoes, and for land attacks, it has Tomahawk cruise missiles. The hard-to-detect and very versatile submarine could be the one to land the initial punches. Arleigh Burke-class warships were designed as multi-mission destroyers capable of anti-aircraft warfare, anti-submarine warfare, and anti-surface warfare. The Arleigh Burke-class of guided missile destroyers is the United States Navy's first class of destroyer built around the Aegis combat system. The Aegis Ballistic Missile Defense System is a United States DoD Missile Defense Agency program developed to provide missile defense against short to intermediate range ballistic missiles. Aegis BMD is designed to intercept ballistic missiles post-boost phase and prior to re-entry. Aegis BMD equipped vessels can transmit their target detection information to other systems and, if needed, engage potential threats using either SM-2 or SM-3 missile. SM-3 missile, having range of 2,500 kilometers and speed of Mach 10.2, is expected to be particularly effective against North Korean missiles like Nodong missiles, Musudan, and Taepodong that have short to intermediate range. Guam is referred to by U.S. commanders as a permanent aircraft carrier. There's a good reason for it. It's home to F-16 and F-18 fighter jets, as well as B-52 bombers. The F-16 and F-18 fighters, though being fourth-generation fighters, are equipped with excellent weapons and are flown by highly trained and experienced pilots. The Boeing B-52 Stratofortress is an American long-range, subsonic, jet-powered strategic bomber. The B-52 was designed and built by Boeing, which has continued to provide support and upgrades. The United States Air Force has operated it since the 1950s. The bomber is capable of carrying up to 70,000 pounds, that's 32,000 kilograms, of weapons, and has a typical combat range of more than 8,800 miles without aerial refueling. The Air Force has also deployed B-1B Lancer to the base starting August 6th. B-1B has an excellent range of 5,900 miles, or 9,400 kilometers, and service ceiling of 60,000 feet. B-1B has a massive payload of 125,000 pounds, that's 56,700 kilograms, internal and external ordnance combined. The supersonic bomber is designed for deploying conventional as well as nuclear bombs. The B-52 and B-1B with F-16 or F-18 fighter escorts are capable for quick and massive damage to North Korea. In 2013, the U.S. Army's Terminal High Altitude Area Defense THAAD system was deployed to the island, giving Washington the power to shoot down North Korean ballistic missiles. THAAD is designed to shoot down short, medium, and intermediate range ballistic missiles in their terminal phase. It uses a hit-to-kill approach, that is, the missile carries no warhead, but relies on the kinetic energy of impact to destroy the incoming missile. The THAAD system is being designed, built, and integrated by Lockheed Martin Space Systems, acting as a prime contractor. A THAAD battery consists of at least 6 launcher vehicles, each equipped with 8 missiles. The THAAD radar is an X-band, active electronically scanned array radar, developed and built by Raytheon. The system has an operational range of around 200 kilometers with a speed of 8.24 Mach. It's ideally suited to take out North Korean missiles.
Number 1.
With rhetoric getting higher and higher, it's safe to assume that the U.S. has deployed 1 or 2 Ohio-class submarines in close vicinity to Guam. The Ohio class is a class of 14 ballistic missile submarines of Ohio class together carry approximately 50% of the total U.S. active inventory of strategic thermonuclear warheads. The Ohio class submarines are the largest submarines ever built for the U.S. Navy, having a displacement of 16,764 tons. Each carries 24 Trident submarine-launched ballistic missiles that have a range of 11,000 kilometers. Each of these missiles has 12 MIRV, multiple independent reentry vehicle, nuclear warheads, and each of these warheads have explosive power equivalent to 300 to 475 kilotons of TNT. Ohio class could be the weapon of choice for President Trump when he warned that threats from North Korea would be met with fire and fury like the world has never seen. As inferred by the above points, Guam is capable enough in itself to thwart any North Korean attack, as well as respond with massive firepower. Nonetheless, it will have solid backing from U.S. forces stationed in Japan, the 7th Fleet, as well as forces deployed in South Korea. In any war, surprise is the key, and North Korea has given it away. Guam will be more ready than ever. An attack at this stage on Guam will be very costly and lead to enormous retaliation. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more videos like this. Hit the like button if you find the video interesting. And kindly provide your feedback in the comment section. This will help us improve.